We got now 10 games left in the season for the Arizona Coyotes. Where does Arizona go from here? Where do they stand among the NHL teams? What do we expect from them in the final 10 games and beyond? We're going to talk about that on today's episode of the Locked On Coyotes podcast.
You're Locked On Coyotes, your daily podcast on the Arizona Coyotes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the show, everybody. I'm Robyn Leonio. That's Carl Pavlik on today's episode of Locked On Coyotes. We got a good show for you on today's episode. We're just getting through the final 10 games, Carl, because, if you had told me at this point in the season that the Arizona Coyotes would be with 27 wins, 66 points, I'd be like, no.
Yeah.
I don't think so.
I mean, it's definitely one of those things where we should expect incremental growth by the Coyotes. But this season has really been carried off of the performance of some key players, and they've stolen some games. It's quite impressive to kind of look back at.
Yeah, it really is, because you look at the win streaks they had. What they had, just the point streaks that they had. You wonder. I believe they're still on technically a point streak because they've only lost in overtime recently.
I think no. The point streak ended.
They're lost to the Jets.
Yep. Yeah. So if they get a point tonight, it'll be the start of a new point streak. But it was 8 games, including a 4-game win streak thrown in there. So that's really impressive, especially after the trade deadline when you expect them to be at their weakest.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's the interesting thing, that you would think that'd be the case, especially because they lost a lot of players. Yeah. They lost Jacob Chikrin. They lost Shane Gostisbehere. They lost Nick Bukestad. They lost Nick Ritchie. And you think it's okay, they lost so many people. This team is just gonna is stripped down. Not to complete bare bones, but it's pretty darn stripped down.
Yeah.
So you're like, okay, it's now time for the tank for Bedard. We're just we're gonna ride the end of the season. Get towards the bottom of the standings, draft Connor Bedard or Adam Fantilli, and that is that. Obviously, I'm going to talk about the lottery and where they kind of stand up that in a little bit, but that didn't happen. They didn't slide as what we expected to. They just kept going.
Well, it's definitely been noticeable. I will say this: looking back at the past couple games, the Coyotes have won, but they're getting less offense from their blue line. Valimaki has really stood up. Mosier also doing really well. Had a goal in the Coyotes last game, but it's not as consistent of a offense from there. And Bukestad, of course, that's a pretty big loss. But his line mates, Matias Michelli and Lawson Krause, they've continued to have success together. Jack McBain's thrown in there. So it's what we want to see. It is the younger players performing while the veterans are on the move.
And that's what you want. Yeah, that's definitely what you want to see. That idea that the future of the Coyotes is in good hands. And that's the case. It really is. It's just, I'll reiterate, surprising it happened this early, given not A, just our expectations, and B, just what we had in mind for the season, in the sense that okay, this was going to be, that tanking year. And I'll go back to what you said several times over the course of the last couple of years is that organizations tank, players don't.
Yeah.
This is another very good year of an example of that being the case. You look at what Bill Armstrong has done. He stripped this team down to kind of see if they can get as good of a draft pick as they could in this upcoming draft. But this team just kept winning.
And there's a big elephant in the room that we haven't discussed yet. And I think it's key, and it needs to be something that we look at the next few years when deciding how the Coyotes are going to go, and that's Clayton Keller. He is having just a phenomenal year. He has built off his last season like tremendously well, exactly how you would hope. He currently has 34 goals, 44 assists, 78 points. He is likely going to surpass Radim Verbata's 35 goal season, which is going to make him like have the most goals scored in a Coyotes since I've watched, and he could very well overtake Kachuk for the record for most points as a Coyote. Like,
What is it, 82, 84? Something like that?
I think 82. Let me check real quick. Unfortunately, he's still a ways off from franchise history because those Jets numbers, some of them are just ridiculous.
I mean, especially if you look at the WHA Jets years, it's like that's
or just Teemu Solani.
Just Teemu Solani. That's all you got to. Yeah.
Yeah. Why can't Clayton Keller have a 70-goal rookie season? Come on. Why is he so lazy?
Who knows?
I was gonna go year by year, but I'm like, I could just look at Kachuk, and that'll tell me,
right?
Because we know it's him.
I mean, I know it's in the low 80s, and I think knowing that, I think Keller can definitely overtake that with 10 games left.
10 games left
against, mostly playoff teams. The exception, actually, 3 of them are not playoff teams. 3 of them are bottom barrel teams that are also tanking.
Yeah, but he's gotta reach. What did I say? 86 points.
86. Okay.
Yeah, he is currently at
78. So he needs 8 points. If he maintains his point per game pace, he's easily going to pass that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Over point per game pace.
Exactly.
So, the idea that the Coyotes would have a point per game player is astonishing. The fact that we are going to see, knock on wood, in all likelihood, Clayton Keller set a record in a tank year. I know that if the Coyotes miss out on a top 3 pick, there's questions about whether or not they should go again and look for a generational talent. I don't think you're going to get it if you keep Clayton Keller on the team. And you shouldn't trade Clayton Keller for the chance at a lottery.
Clayton Keller is the centerpiece of this Arizona Coyotes team throughout the rebuild. You do not mess with that.
Yeah. And, let's give some credit to his line mates before break. Barrett Hayton has looked extremely good. Nick Schmaltz, 50 points in 53 games. That's great. You love to see it. That whole line is clicking. And sure, it's one line, and a team with one line can be stopped pretty easily, but still a very impressive line.
Exactly. We're going to continue to talk about the Arizona Coyotes' final 10 games of the season and beyond, where we think they are. We'll talk about the lottery, all that in just a bit. But first, we're going to take a quick break to hear from our sponsors on the show.
No matter how the last game went, anytime you take the field, you've got a shot at greatness. You could give your team the best shot at winning by recruiting more MVPs from Indeed. That is right. If you are hiring, you need Indeed, because Indeed is the hiring partner where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. And Indeed is the only job site where you're guaranteed to find quality applications. That means your must have requirements or else you don't pay. Indeed, instead of spending hours on multiple job sites, hoping to find candidates with the right skills, you need one powerful hiring partner that will help you do it all. Indeed partners with you on every step of the hiring process to find great talent through time saving tools like Indeed Instant Match, assessments, and virtual interviews. With Instant Match, as soon as you sponsor a post, you will get a short list of qualified candidates with resumes on Indeed that match your job description, and you can invite them to apply right away. Plus, you only pay for quality applications that meet your must have requirements. So, what I want you to do is start hiring right now with a $75 sponsored job credit to upgrade your job post at Indeed.com/lockedon. This offer is valid through March 31st. So go to Indeed.com/lockedon to claim your $75 credit before the 31st. Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire. You need Indeed.
So let's continue this conversation, Carl. Let's kind of retake a look at the tank, because there is a very slim chance now that they're going to be, get a top 3 pick. It's still
I think
there,
it's like
but
10%. That's not that slim.
it's still pretty slim. I mean, it's better than much less than the what 33% that they would have gotten for the first overall pick if they completely nuked everything.
Yeah.
But it goes back to the question you had about Clayton Keller, is like, do you just or kind of the, not really the question, but like the idea that you said, hey, you can't really get rid of Clayton Keller to continue tanking to get someone like Connor Bedard. You just can't do that.
Yeah.
Connor Bedard, would he change the franchise in an instant? Absolutely. If the Coyotes are able to, somehow get up in in the lottery and somehow really win out and get Connor Bedard, will we be happy? Oh, absolutely. Is it the end of the world if they don't get him? No. Because of the talent they already have, Carl. One and two, this is a deep draft. Like, it might still be a far fetched idea for Adam Fantilli. That's fine. But Leo Carlson, maybe. But Mitchkov, maybe. Some of these other ones, they're pretty good. They're pretty close in there, and they've still got a chance to get some really, really high end talent in this upcoming draft.
Yeah. And I mean, let's say this. If the Coyotes do not get a top 3 pick, then what they can do, what they have less pressure to do, is draft defensemen, because the high end talent, the names that we've been talking about since the start of the season have primarily been forwards. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the Coyotes have a massive weakness at the blue line right now, and not having that pressure means that you can draft for a position, which is not something that I generally think you should do. I think you should go for the best player. But when we were building the fantasy lines for the Coyotes the next couple seasons, like we were able to give like 3 solid lines, without a player at this year's draft. We could not do that for the blue line. We cannot fill out a blue line with the Coyotes prospects in the pipeline right now.
Right. Exactly. So that's one thing that's one way you can look at it. Also keep in mind they still do also have the Ottawa Senators pick, which could very well go up too, to a decent point. Obviously, it can't be top 5 because it's top 5 protected, but they still get it.
The Senators are currently 5 points out of a playoff spot with 10 games. So they're probably not going to make the playoffs. I'm willing to throw that out there. They have, what was it? 75 points in 72 games. So
Yeah.
honestly, they're slightly better than the Coyotes. They're 9 points better than the Coyotes, which is not that much when you look at some of the other teams.
No,
But
it's not. Yeah, it's not that much better at all. And you look, so you look at that. They have 2 picks. One of those 2 picks has to be used on a defenseman.
yeah, yeah. I mean, honestly, both of them probably should be used on a defenseman. That is just my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
I think the Coyotes need to go with some they need to take a chance in the blue line because you are not necessarily going to get a guaranteed defenseman, a guaranteed number one. Like you are going to need to get as many as you can and hope that one of them hits in a big way.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think I'll even go ahead and throw this out a little bit more, Carl, and the idea that maybe the growth that we're seeing from Logan Cooley in his college freshman year at Minnesota could very well also give us the idea. It's like, okay, maybe we're going to be pretty deep in our forwards, knowing the you know the upswing of talent that's showcasing right now on our current roster, as well as taking a look at this kid who's tearing it up in the NCAA.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I don't want to discount like some of the other prospects who have had like pretty solid years, but Cooley is definitely a big piece. You have Barrett Hayton currently as your number one center. That takes a little bit of pressure off of Cooley. That's fine.
Right.
I'm absolutely fine with him like not being on the top line next year because it does seem like he is going to be joining the Coyotes.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, you can kind of work out from there. Like we have seen that Matias Maccelli is a really impressive playmaker. Throw him with Cooley, kind of see how that works. I would be interested to see like what they can do, with Guenther on the other wing. Like have a very young kind of line, which is, let's be real, the opposite of what Tocchet would have done.
And Guenther has played out better than a lot of people thought this soon also. So if these players are kind of panning out, a little bit sooner, then the outlook looks good. Obviously, they still have to develop to the level that we expect for more elite play, and that's going to take a little bit. That's fine, but you look at that potential, how they're playing. It's 100% there.
Yeah, it is definitely a hard situation for the Coyotes to be in because every team would love to start their rebuild with a generational talent. Everyone would love to do that. Unfortunately, I don't think the Coyotes are going to have that opportunity without getting lucky. And you can't plan on being lucky. That is the thing about luck. It is unplanned. So, I mean, ultimately, it may be a situation where it's kind of the race that they got to go with, and supplement their offense through trade, supplement like acquire players in addition to the dead contracts, start bringing in prospects instead of picks, sign a splashy free agent, or offer sheet someone. Like
They have the draft capital to offer sheet someone if necessary.
Yeah,
So do it if you really want. If you're really serious, if Bill Armstrong is really serious about building, um, and I know we're talking about the final 10 games as well, but if Bill Armstrong is really serious about building this team, he says he wants to build through the draft. That's fine, but you have to look elsewhere too because the draft you can you know you'll get a player who can play right away in the first 10 picks.
sure.
Um, that's tends to be usually the case. Usually, you wait a year. But outside of that, these are players that wait a couple years. Um, I'm a firm believer, Carl, that the Coyotes should at least have a kind of level, not pushing playoffs very, very soon, but have a pushing in that trajectory pretty darn soon, and at least give the idea that they're really pushing for that with knowing the arena situation that we have right now.
Sure. Like it, it is definitely something that we're going to need to discuss on like an episode of itself. But with the initial premise of this being a 5-year rebuild, by year 4 and 5, you expect them to be like on the way up,
Right.
like playoff, like contention, bubble, that sort of thing. And you know, building through the draft is fine. I would actually say that like the top 3 would be right away. And then 4 through 10, that's more like a season. And yeah, it's really hard to look at the season that Clayton Keller especially is having and say this is a team that could be competing for a top 3 spot next season in the draft. I don't see it happening because you got to imagine there are teams that are on the way down. Like the Sharks are probably going to get worse next season. The Canucks, God, I don't even know what's going to happen to them. It's going to be
Right.
a train wreck. But like the Coyotes are,
They
like it
can
or
still
not,
build to the draft
yeah,
and build and add other pieces.
you could supplement the draft.
Exactly. I mean, let's look at this. The Coyotes right now have over 30 picks through the next 3 years of the NHL draft. That
Yeah,
is unbelievable. So don't need to worry about that at all.
yeah. Heck, maybe package some of those picks and move up in the draft. We've seen
I
them
mean,
do
they
that.
did it last year.
Yeah.
They did it to get Connor Geeky. It happened.
Yep.
Although which is still a question mark of a pick to some people, but we'll see. We'll see how he plays out. I'm trying to be as optimistic for Connor Geeky as I can.
Yeah. He is definitely a player to keep your eye on.
Anyways, though, we're gonna go finish off. Take a very glimpse at the last 10 games. See how it all plays out. Where the Arizona Coyotes will finish in the standings. Before we get into any of that, though, we're going to take a quick word from our sponsors on the show today. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The tournament is heating up, and now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. You can bet on everything, from the money line to point scores and threes drains. You can bet all you want on the NCAA basketball tournament, but I'm personally going to go shift my focus to the NCAA hockey tournament and watch Logan Cooley and University of Minnesota make their way to the Frozen Four. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at bigger payout with the same game parlay. So don't miss a chance to get your no sweat first bet of up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. So let's take a look, Carl, at the last 10 games. I mentioned briefly that the last 10 games are against mostly playoff teams with three bottom barrel teams. It starts, Carl, with a 2-game home and home with the Colorado Avalanche. What a way to start the last 10 games.
Yeah. And it is the Colorado Avalanche have proven to be like the Black Knight from Monty Python, only instead of just standing there with one leg, he regrows all of his limbs. Because they are looking really good. 7 wins in their last 10 games, including wins off of bottom feeder teams. So, like, one of the things I've always looking for is like, hey, I know how well you play against the Toronto Maple Leafs. I know how well you play against the Dallas Stars. How do you play against the Montreal Canadiens? How do you play against the San Jose Sharks? Like, do you let those easy points go away? The Colorado Avalanche do not. They are looking for first in their division. Expect them to be ready.
Oh, it's gonna be a tough game. Just no doubt, a tough 2 games, no doubt about it. But I think it's a good way to kind of get these young guys going, right?
Yeah.
Last year we talked about throwing some kids to the fire. This year it's like not so much like, yeah, okay, it's still a challenge, but I feel like at this point in the season, there's no harm in just letting these kids ride it and develop.
One series that I want to talk about, 3 games against the Seattle Kraken. 3 out of 4 games in like a week in April. It's going to be Kraken.
Oh, that's gonna be crazy to have those 3, and especially because the Kraken are a team that's just right there on the in the playoff spot in the Pacific Division, and they're looking good. They're looking surprisingly good, and I'm pretty sure that they want to focus on where they place in the Pacific Division, because I think there's still a chance that they can move up in the standings a little bit. It's not a whole lot of a chance, but they might want to try to see if they can overtake the Oilers for the 3rd spot, so they don't have to worry about going up against the either like the Golden Knights or the Wild, depending on the other wild card team.
Yeah, but I mean, now we're starting to get the spoiler game. So, like, are the Kraken going to be like looking past the Coyotes, especially on that 3rd night? I'm not sure. It almost feels like a mini series. Like the fact that all 3 games are so closely placed together, like I imagine they're going to be doing their prep work.
Oh, absolutely, and there's going to be a lot of prep work, and I think either way, no matter what, it'll still be a challenge for the Coyotes. It'll be a big challenge for the Coyotes because there are teams earlier this year that kind of wrote the Coyotes off because, like, oh, we're a better team, easily a better team. So, and then they end up losing like crazy.
Cough, Toronto Maple Leafs, cough.
Exactly. The Kraken are definitely not going to be one of those teams because they're where they are and because, so those 3 games, all 3 of them are going to be a massive challenge. Because they're not going to not that they are lower in the standings, so they want to also fight to prove themselves, but because they are where they are right now.
Yeah, let's be real. The Kraken should not be taking anyone lightly. They were not locks to make this. They
were terrible last year.
Yeah, there is still a chance that they may slip out of the standings. So, but can
you imagine that they slip down the standings? Not only do they go on a losing streak, but they lose all 3 of those games to Arizona, and then that caused them to slip out of the playoffs. Can you imagine the chaos?
That is one of the things that you fire a coach over, or a GM, or somebody. Like, there are losses that are so big, you're like, someone is fired. I'm not sure who it is yet, but we need to send a message, and that could happen.
I mean, remember last year I was kind of calling for chaos at the end of the year when I'm like, hey, maybe we can keep the Golden Knights from making a playoff spot. Maybe we can just move, like, mess with other people's standings in the uh, um, in the playoffs. Like they force the Predators down to the wild card spot. Like, it's interesting to see chaos happen, and I'd love to see it when it's the Arizona Coyotes causing chaos, because Carl, it just makes hockey Twitter and just Canadian hockey fans lose their mind that Arizona does something like that.
Yep.
But let's take a look too at the three games that I mentioned against teams that are uh, tanking in the San Jose Sharks, the Anaheim Ducks, and the Vancouver Canucks. Um, I'm trying to figure out how those games play out because of the fact that those teams are tanking teams.
I imagine both teams are going to start. You know, there are a lot of AHL players. See what they can do. I'm thinking Prosvetov gets some, starts for that. I imagine the other teams are going to do the same. Those to me, like tank offs, they are unpredictable, but also less interesting to me than like the teams that are in it and seeing how they perform.
Yeah, I think if you are the Coyotes and you're still focusing on the rebuild, fine. And like, if you're Andre Tourigny and Bill Armstrong, man, find a way to not win those games, those three games. So I think those are where the standings are the most important in trying to get a better standing area for purposes of the tank.
Yep.
And of course, you want ideally, I mean, going in a 10-game losing streak is out of the picture. Like, I don't think the Coyotes can, based off the Coyotes team that we've seen, I don't think that is going to happen. But you have to figure out ways, if you're tanking, to lose games elsewhere.
I mean, the problem is your opponents are also figuring out ways to lose games. So, but I mean, at a certain point, I think you just gotta rely on the quality of the competition.
True. True. Any final things you want to do about these final 10 games?
It's gonna be exciting. The Coyote season has been not fun, but exciting.
It has been. Last year, we were like kind of getting bored for a while, trying to figure out ways to add really fun content. The Coyotes, for the most part, have made it a little bit easier. We still have gone through some tough stretches where it's like we're thinking in our head, what are we even going to do? But the Coyotes have done enough to kind of make some things interesting for us to get some content.
Yep.
But on that note, we're going to be done for today's episode of the Locked On Coyotes podcast. If you like what you heard, don't forget to leave a review, like, comment, subscribe if you have yet to already. We're available everywhere you get your podcasts, including on YouTube. Don't forget to interact with us on social media. We're on Facebook, facebook.com/LockedOnCoyotes, and on Twitter at LO_Coyotes. I'm personally at Robyn_Leonio. Carl is he is at 5 for Howling. Almost did that one more again. Interact with us, ask the question you might have, interact with us, and we'll answer a question back on a future episode of the Locked On Coyotes podcast. Thanks again, everyone, for listening to today's episode. Hope you guys staying safe out there. Hope you guys staying healthy. And don't forget to howl on.